to show the transfer of ownership. I'm afraid that's as big as I could get it in high resolution, but as you can see, it is, in fact, needlessly complicated. There's one particular feature that I like, which you probably can't see, which is up here. It actually says black hole. It becomes impossible to determine who owns the mortgage. Does this look somewhat familiar? Now, we all want a nice place to live, and in a resource-based economy, there will be a wide selection of building designs to choose from, and they will reflect your lifestyle and interests. For example, if you're an oceanographer, or you just enjoy the sea, then you could live in a detachable sea dome, or in a coastal region, or even in a city in the sea itself. But maybe one day you decided you had enough and you wanted to move. In today's society, you'd have to find a house for sale that you liked. You'd have to sell your house, arrange a means of transporting all your furniture and clothes and everything else, and then you still have to worry about the regular hassle of paying bills, rent or mortgage, whatever. Lots of money. In a resource-based economy, however, things would be simplified greatly. You could simply leave your house, move into a new one with no forms to fill out. You wouldn't need to transport any luggage, as all amenities would be available on site or close by. You would need nothing but the clothes on your back. Our houses are such unwieldy property that we are often imprisoned rather than housed by them. And now we move on to a similar concept, resource access. Recreation will be simplified greatly in a resource-based economy. Say you wanted to go on a bike ride. A bike would be made available to you from a local distribution centre. When you were finished with the bike, you could return it to the bike distribution centre or at the start of the biking trail, where it would be maintained, presumably by machines, until somebody else needed it. Kind of like how a public library works. You could, if you wanted, keep it for yourself. But this would entail the obligation of maintaining it yourself. Maybe you use it enough to warrant keeping it for yourself, but the choice is yours. You don't really want to own the bike, you just want to be able to use it when you want to. And that's the main problem with property, is that it enforces both ownership, and so the right to use the property, but also the obligation to maintain it. And obviously this then suggests why access is more important than property, because we don't really need to own anything. We just want to use it when we want to use it. In a similar way, it's also, yes, resource access. In a similar way, it's also more materially efficient to do things by resource access than, say, property. Take, for example, cars. There's millions and millions of cars on the planet, but really they spend most of their time parked in car parks, not really, they're not servicing any passengers. Instead, why don't we have cars that were designed so that when they drop the passenger off, they could be guided by GPS or satellite or whatever to pick up another passenger nearby and transfer them, and the process continues so that the cars are only really out of service when they're not in use. And this leads to another distortion on a slight tangent, that really property distorts the value of objects. The car is simply a mode of transport, a tool to get from A to B. But in our culture, cars have become status symbols. And despite their relative inefficiency, their relatively low speed, and the relatively high risk associated by traveling by car, then people still love to own a fancy car. But I think, to summarize the issue on property, there's a lovely quote by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. The first man who, having enclosed a piece of ground, bethought himself of saying, "This is mine," and found people simple enough to believe him, was the real founder of civil society. From how many crimes, wars, and murders, from how many horrors and misfortunes, might not anyone have saved mankind by pulling up the stakes, or filling up the ditch, and crying to his fellows, "Beware of listening to this impostor. You are undone if you once forget that the fruits of the earth belong to us all, and the earth itself to nobody." is nothing more than a tool for our convenience, just as Ptolemy's model caused endless confusion. Our cultural assumptions have lended themselves to a society in decay, rife with stratification and distorted value systems that prevent people from looking beyond the familiar. Curiously, because Ptolemy was a scientist, he encouraged people to challenge the status quo and search for their own answers. At the heart of our problems on this planet lies the monetary institution and the cultural assumptions that shield it. Now we can see it in all its glory. That's really graphic. And to finish as a whole, another little quote that I relish. Only when the last tree has died, and the last river been poisoned, and the last fish been caught, will we realise that we cannot eat money.
Next up, we've got Buxton. Andrew's going to talk about the Wings project design. He's the guy, along with Yulita, his partner. They've been updating all Jacques' designs, all his engineering drawings. I mean, this guy spent 2 years, both of them, and now working all out to get this stuff done. So, these people are working hard every day of their life. So, Buxton.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes. At the back? Brilliant. Good afternoon, my name's Andrew. I'm the co-founder of the Wings project design with my partner Julia, who's sitting over there. Before I go into the more detailed presentation of the Wings project design and the design of the circular cities, I'd just like to introduce the rest of the Wings project design team. So first of all, we have Ben McLeish, just over here, who's spoke before? No, Ben's our lecturer. Tom Williams, our event coordinator. Jason Gleeson, who is over at the back there doing the audio. And Mark Whitner and Stuart Dobson, who couldn't be here today, they're our web developers, and they're the ones that are, they developed the website that we've got up here. The Venus Project design was created shortly after myself and Julie, my partner, watched Zeitgeist Addendum shortly after it was released, and realised that we could help out on the design side of things for the Venus Project, as we both come from a computer-aided design background in the construction industry. Our initial goal was to create a global CAD agency that the Venus Project could use to develop up the construction drawings for the first TVP cities. It later worked out really that we realised that unless we actually got the funding and the opportunity from the country to actually build one of these cities, it was pretty futile to actually try designing one at this time. Because by the time we actually get the opportunity to do a city, the design will likely have changed by then, the technology will have changed by then, and there's a lot of variables involved with the design of the cities that could change by that time. So we later developed the website to include a global scientific and technical database. We've now got around 1,500 people, I believe, on that database, from everything from architects, engineers, neuroscientists, all the different scientific fields. We've got technicians from all different fields that are signed up there, so that if at some point in the future a country does decide to take on the Venus Project ideals and build the first city, we can then pull on that database and bring the people in that local area or that local country into the design of those first cities. Myself and partner, we've also had a long-term interest in 3D computer-aided visualizations. This is some of the stuff in mid-process that we've been working on with the Venus Project. We also have a group of volunteers through the database that actually help us with the 3D modelling. So we're actually taking Jacques' thousands of sketches and creating 3D models out of those for visualisation purposes to show people what these cities may look like in the future. Okay, so having spent much time with Jacques over the last few years developing his sketches into 3D models and learning about the design principles that he uses and why, I'd like to share some time with you with this today with a broader understanding of why the cities look the way they do, why they're circular, why the buildings are white. Many of the questions that are normally addressed, especially I get a lot of this on Facebook, people grilling me for hours of why things are the way they are, so we'll go into some of that now. Our current system of resource extraction is transportation through to finalise manufacturing and production of goods and their transportation to the end user is actually extremely inefficient in our current system. It's wasteful and it's outdated. And when you consider 99% of all materials produced in the US ends up in a landfill within 6 weeks, every tonne of garbage dumped takes 5 tonnes of material resources to produce. The waste in our current system is quite clearly out of control. And when you add into the mix that the cost of importing and exporting these goods all over the globe and the inherent pollution that is caused within this system, it's quite clear this is just a complete failure on all levels. And we can't continue to do this if we want to survive on this planet. The Venus Project cities are not built for architectural ego, and hence we need to be evaluated on a different set of criteria than we're used to. That actual functionality is not something that architects are taught in our current schools. Just as we try to identify the root causes in our social ills